Tinder, the app that lets you judge people based on their appearance with a simple swipe. It was a playground for young adults. What started as a bit of innocent fun soon spiraled into a nightmare. I have to admit, I was never a fan of dating apps. The whole concept seemed odd to me. But after months of watching my friends use Tinder, I thought, why not give it a shot? After all, my ex had cheated on me a few months prior, and I had spent countless days mourning the relationship, questioning every little thing I might have done wrong. It was time to jump back into the dating pool. A few days of using the app, and I was surprisingly getting the hang of it. 50 matches and 6 decent conversations under my belt. I was on a roll. And then I stumbled upon Sarah. Her profile was something else entirely. Her pictures were stunning, and her profile mentioned her experience working in clubs and studying fashion at Northampton College. She was drop-dead gorgeous. I swiped right, hoping for a match, and voila, luck was on my side. I wanted to play it cool, not rush things. So, after what felt like a day, though it was probably more like half an hour, I sent a casual, "Hey." No response. Panic set in. Oh no, did I mess it up already? I fretted. I went through all the possible ways a simple "hey" could go wrong. Should I have said hi or what's up? It was too late now. An hour went by and my phone finally vibrated with a Tinder notification from Sarah. Hey! Success! We started chatting, discussing our interests, past relationships, and more. After a few days of conversation, I felt like I knew her pretty well. She shared that her parents had separated, and she lived with her dad, juggling 2 jobs to support both of them. We were even both Virgos. It seemed like things were going splendidly. Finally, the moment arrived when it felt right to ask, any chance we could meet up? Get a drink or coffee? Sure. My heart raced with excitement. I didn't expect her to say yes so readily. We exchanged numbers and continued texting, agreed to meet at a bar. It was 8 p.m. when I got on the bus and started walking toward the bar. My heart was pounding, and my palms were sweaty. Thoughts raced through my mind. What if she doesn't like me in person? I worried. I reached the entrance of the bar, where we had agreed to meet before heading inside. This is when things took a strange turn. She hadn't been texting much that day, and her responses were becoming increasingly brief with long gaps in between. I brushed it off as nerves. My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. Babe, I just walked past you. You look even more amazing in person. I was too shy to say hi. Please forgive me. I glanced up from my phone and scanned the street. There were only a few students and some elderly folks returning from the theater. Where are you? I'm eager to meet you. I texted. No response. I tried again. Are you just playing around with me, LOL? Still, nothing. My phone chimed again. Please forgive me. That's when things started to feel eerie. The darkness, the deserted streets. It wasn't helping my unease. I kept glancing around, trying to spot her. Then, out of the corner of my eye, on the opposite side of the street and further down, I saw a silhouette facing me. It was too dark to see any features, just a person in a long black jacket with the hood up. Could that really be her? I cautiously reached for my phone and sent a blank text, all while keeping my gaze fixed on the figure. A phone screen lit up in their hand. Forget this, I thought. And I started power walking in the opposite direction. Who was this person? Another text arrived. Why are you walking away? Don't you find me pretty? That was it. I realized I had been fooled. I felt like a complete idiot for falling for it. All I wanted was to get home and forget this ever happened. Sarah, I am an attractive girl. You'll see. It sent shivers down my spine. I refused to respond. All I could imagine was some stranger texting me now. The allure of Sarah had evaporated instantly. The entire way home, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. I couldn't tell if it was just paranoia or if someone was actually tailing me. Either way, I had to get home. I rushed through the front door, locked it, and checked all the windows and back doors. I needed some sleep. It took me a while to drift off, my mind still replaying that figure standing there. At 4 a.m., I was awakened by my phone vibrating. The immediate brightness of the screen blinded me for a moment. As my eyes adjusted, I looked at the notification. Sarah. My heart froze as I opened the message. It took a moment to process what I was seeing. It was a picture message. A picture of my bedroom, taken from the doorway. Attached to the photo was the message, Sleeping Beauty. I was facing away from the now open bedroom door, even though I was certain I had closed it before going to sleep. The hallway light spilled into the room. I sat up in bed almost instantly, my head turned toward the door. Standing in the doorway, wearing a dirty, torn, knee-length pink dress, was a man. An extremely elderly man, barely 5 feet tall, sporting a blonde wig, pink eyeshadow, and red lipstick. His eyes were wide, locked onto me. The room was dead silent, except for his heavy breathing. I stared in horror at this figure just 5 meters away from me. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I sat there, paralyzed with fear. The man took a step forward, making himself more visible. His mouth, with drool dripping from his smeared lipstick, formed an unnaturally large, grotesque smile. "Don't you think I'm pretty?" he asked in a raspy voice, his grin widening. Thoughts raced through my mind, but I couldn't find my voice. I couldn't even move. My heart raced at an alarming rate. Who are you?" I managed to stammer. My legs felt like jelly. The figure continued to stand there, his eyes piercing my soul. His unsettling smile grew larger, with saliva continuing to drip from his smeared lipstick. "I'm Sarah, and I am a pretty girl." I've known Chris since elementary school, and during the 2 years we've lived together in this apartment, he hasn't changed much. He's still into sci-fi and fantasy, still a little bit shy and awkward around new people. He still struggles with weight and confidence issues, and he's still one of the most thoughtful people I know. Or at least, he was until recently. Between my dead-end warehouse job and family drama, I've got my own issues. But I try to help Chris with his problems, just as he's always been there for me during mine. I was the one who first suggested to Chris that he use dating apps to make friends and maybe find something more. It had worked for me in the past, and I figured that if Chris could message back and forth a bit to build up his confidence, he might have a little more success. That makes this my fault, at least partly. But let's face it, I was worried about the guy. He hadn't met anyone new since high school, and the recent pandemic limited his options even more. Without access to the game shops and conventions that were usually the only places he felt comfortable socializing, Chris retreated further and further into shell. He still talked my ear off, just like old times, but I was worried about what might happen if I moved out or started dating someone seriously myself. Chris wouldn't have anyone left. Maybe I pushed him too hard. Maybe I ignored the signs. It's not like the profile he showed me looked photoshopped or fake. The girl had more than one picture, and she looked normal enough. She could even carry on a conversation, although the messages Chris showed me were a bit strange. It was like he'd been messaging back and forth with a dictionary. I figured she was just being formal. After all, maybe she was a little shy too. It's true that her grin was a little big, and her eyes seemed so wide and eager, but that could have just been a trick of the light. I didn't want to discourage my pal from his first opportunity in years, just based on some weird vibe I was getting. She had suggested that they meet, and I told Chris to go for it. That was about 3 days ago. On the night of their date, I remember smirking when the clock passed midnight. My buddy Chris had finally scored, I thought. I was still up gaming in the living room when Chris came in around 3 a.m. When he ignored my questions and walked dreamily toward his bedroom, I figured he was just tired, or hopefully too pleased to speak. Even when Chris hadn't left his room by 2 p.m. the next day, I wasn't concerned. He'd had a late night. Sleeping late was typical Chris behavior too, and I was going to be late for my shift. I didn't start to feel concerned until I came home late that night. The kitchen had been ransacked so badly I thought we'd been broken into, and the smell coming from the bathroom could have gagged a maggot. A half-eaten can of refried beans was splattered like blood across the floor. Drawers and cabinets hung open. Ripped open plastic packages and crumbs were everywhere. The mess led straight to Chris's room, but his door was shut tight. I was exhausted from 8 hours of lugging cardboard boxes around the warehouse, so I just made a mental note to talk to Chris about his cleaning and eating habits before collapsing into bed. The ransacked kitchen was unchanged when I woke up. With a sigh, I knocked on my roommate's bedroom door. "Chris?" I asked. No response. I opened the door with a grimace. This room, too, smelled awful, and with the blinds closed and lamp off, it was incredibly dark. I could barely make out the shape of Chris's chest rising and falling beneath the bedsheets. He was breathing like someone on a respirator. "Chris?" I tried again, a little louder. I stepped in something and cursed as I made my way toward the bedside lamp, the only source of light in Chris's room. I felt for the switch and clicked it on. The room was an even worse disaster than the kitchen, but it was nothing compared to Chris. He looked swollen. His skin puffed out as though he were having an allergic reaction, so much so that it seemed he couldn't even open his eyes. His skin was covered in sweat and the remains of food, and his belly, beneath the sheets. It was so large it seemed distended. I didn't have much time to stare, however, because Chris's inflated hand started flailing around for the light. He smacked it blindly, plunging the room back into darkness. A horrible wheezing sound came from his throat. "Chris, dude, you're scaring me," I shouted. "What's going on?" Bloated fingers closed around my neck. It was like Chris was trying to pull me toward his face and shove me away at the same time. I was shaken like a rag doll. Since when had my roommate been so strong? I fell into the disgusting trash on the floor and hurried for the door, slamming it behind me. That plain white door, with my roommate's name written on a chalkboard, had seemed so plain and ordinary just a few minutes ago, but now it was like the doorway to some awful nest. I kept my eyes fixed on the knob, and I realized I was horrified of seeing my roommate in the light if he came out. I tried to plan my next move, wondering if I should call for help. Chris didn't have medical insurance, though. With a slam, my roommate's door flew open. I squeezed my eyes shut and froze as he barreled towards me, and past me, to the bathroom. I peered around the corner and saw my roommate on his knees in front of the toilet in a position I was all too familiar with. I almost felt relieved. Was that it? Just a hangover and an allergic reaction to some weird cocktail? I went over to Chris, ready to put my hand on his shoulder and ask him what I could do for him. He was retching, but nothing was coming out. At first. That was before I noticed the enormous bulge in Chris's throat. It was like something that had been growing in his stomach was finally making its way out. As sickening as the sight was, I didn't react right away. Not until I saw the first tendril, white and nerve-like, probing out from my friend's mouth. More followed. They reached out blindly for anything they could touch, including me. I shrieked and backed away from the lengthening forest of pale tendrils. It seemed impossible that the writhing mass in front of me could have all fit inside of Chris. But what they were dragging out of him was even worse. The tendrils arranged themselves like spiders' legs, pushing against the bathroom counter, the toilet, and the walls. Chris collapsed as they heaved something out of his throat. It was a fetus, but not like any human baby that I'd ever seen. For one, it was fully alive and mobile, twisting to get free of the tendrils it had used to escape from my friend's body. It gnawed on itself until it got free, landing on the floor with a sickening splat. Before I could react or even scream, the gooey, squirming, horrifically human-looking thing scurried away down the bathroom vent. The forest of tendrils that had birthed it began to wither and cave in over my friend's body. I grabbed Chris's wrist, but I didn't need the lack of pulse to tell me that he was dead. Much too late, I called emergency services. The first responders were ordinary police, but when they saw the scene in my bathroom, they made another call, and the two men who arrived a few minutes later didn't look like the agents of any law enforcement agency that I've ever heard of. They didn't even identify themselves, instead relying on the police to convince me to talk. Not that I needed much prodding. I was already babbling like a lunatic, and I would have done or said anything to get an explanation for what I'd just seen. They asked me if I'd shared fluids or any meals with my roommate recently. They asked if we'd kissed, or if he'd put his mouth on my body at all. Then, without answering a single one of my questions, they sterilized the place and left, taking what was left of Chris with them. The two agents had a hushed conversation beneath the window of our second-floor apartment. I couldn't hear all of it, but I did catch two phrases, "My God," and "They've found a new way to breed." I can honestly say the last few days have been the most fucked up, confusing, and terrifying of my entire life. Apologies in advance for dropping this all here, but I just need to write this down somewhere to try and make sense of everything that's happened. I've spent the past few days with nobody believing me, staring at me like I'm less than nothing. I hope that someone here can see truth in my story. I guess I should just be happy that I'm free to tell this story for the time being. When my parents arrived and posted my bail, I saw salvation in their eyes. My sanity was at least partly restored. But when I frantically tried to explain to them what had happened, I soon watched that salvation turn to doubt. God, how could this happen? What the fuck did I do to deserve this? Anyway, the story. I set out on Thursday morning to go and meet up with this girl. Wait a second, let me start from the beginning. I need to give you proper context. A couple weeks ago, I matched with a pretty hot girl on Tinder. Her name was Sarah. She was 23, just a couple years younger than me. And she had grown up in this town just like me. I was certain I had seen her around a few times. She was the kind of person you've been in the presence of a few times, but never properly connected with, if you know what I mean. We started chatting, and things were going great. We swapped stories about the town, big events that happened growing up, and laughed about how we'd basically lived the same life, but never actually met each other. She was sweet. She made me laugh. And she was very pretty. I was captivated. This went on for about a week. I'd find myself increasingly excited to see her replies to my messages. When my phone buzzed, I hoped it was her, and it usually was, which felt great. I didn't want to hang around and let this opportunity pass. I asked her if she wanted to meet up sometime soon. She eagerly accepted and suggested Thursday, which I was all too happy to agree to. We talked over what we wanted to do, maybe get dinner, see a movie or something. But she worked nights, so it was going to have to be a day date. I think my heart almost stopped completely when she suggested just meeting and hanging out at her apartment. I was prepared to play the long game on this one, but I certainly wasn't complaining that it was shaping up to be more of a sprint to the finish. She gave me her address, and we laughed about how it was in such a rundown part of town. I playfully hounded her over it, which she laughed off, asking in turn how classy my living arrangements were as a single 20-something working a part-time retail job. She had me there. I don't think I could have brought her here. The place is a dump. Thursday rolled around quickly. I cleaned myself up, put on some of my nicer clothes, and left the house. I felt incredible. I had a spring in my step and a condom in my pocket. If only I could have seen then where this day would go, I might have had the sense to stay home. I rounded the corner to her apartment block and stared up in grim fascination. This place looked terrible. It was like a caricature of urban decay, a relic of a bygone time that the years had not treated well. I laughed to myself in the relief that she lived on the ground floor. I wasn't going to have to venture into the belly of this beast. I made my way over to her door, apartment 12. I stifled myself, took a deep breath, and knocked on the door. No answer. I double-checked the number and knocked again. Nothing. I walked around to the side window, peered through the bars to see if I could see her inside, but I could barely make out anything. The room looked nearly empty. I tried the door once more, but still no answer. I heard a shuffling inside and the faint sound of a door closing. This must be her. She's coming to let me in now. Nothing. Curiosity got the better of me, and I tried the door, yelling her name as I did. It's unlocked, and I let myself in, but nobody replies to my calls. The place is horrendous. A wrecked open space punctuated by a couple of pieces of smashed furniture and trash. Something was wrong here. I should have run. Compelled by my curiosity, I continued to venture through the awful place, calling Sarah's name as I went. I checked the first couple of rooms in the hallway and found nothing, but my heart sank as I walked into what I assume was the kitchen area. That's where I saw her. She was laid out on the floor like a rag doll, her bright summer dress standing out in stark contrast against her dank surroundings. My instincts kicked in, and I ran over to her in an attempt to help. I cradled her lifeless body in a panic as I tried to work out what the fuck was going on. Her neck was bruised like she'd been strangled, but she was still warm, color fading from her face with each passing moment. I had no idea what to do. I started frantically yelling for help, but there were no replies. I took a deep breath, collected myself, and pulled out my phone to call 911. The second my hand clutched onto my phone, I felt it vibrate in my hand. New Tinder message from Sarah. I opened it without hesitation. I'm so happy you found me. I felt faint. I felt ill. What in the fuck was going here? Before I had time to wrap my head around any of the myriad fucked up things about this situation, I heard a sound that chilled me to my core. Her phone vibrated in her purse. I pulled it out, hoping that it might offer me some answers. There it was, on the screen. New Tinder message from Rob. I'm so happy I found you. I couldn't suppress the need to vomit any longer. My body gave in, and I collapsed onto the floor. When I pulled myself together, I started to scroll through the Tinder conversation on her phone. It was nearly identical to the one on mine. Nearly. Minor details changed. Roles were reversed in the conversation. On her phone, I had asked her to meet me here. Before I even had time to try and figure out what had happened or calculate how monumentally fucked I was, the sirens rolled in. Pretty soon I was cuffed up in the back of a cruiser. Since then, I've been protesting my innocence so hard that I've not even had time to process what happened. I've not slept a wink. And with each passing hour, my pleas for understanding began to sound more and more like the ramblings of a madman. I'm being recalled for further questioning tomorrow. I am certain this is where my life ends.